Hi guys, welcome to Love and Lust Audiobooks channel, updated daily with great audiobooks. So please subscribe to me if you don't want to miss it. Well, let's go to read this book, Stolen by the Rival Alpha, Part 3, Chapter 21 to 30. Chapter 21, Talk About Your Lover. The sense of relief was overwhelming. Getting back to Nebra safely, thanks to Furio, finding the hideout on the first try without a snag, and reuniting with the family and the rest of my pack, all alive and unharmed. Why, it was all a humbling sensation. And a gratifying one, knowing I'd helped Gemma and Raisa survive and get to safety and into the care of motherly females. After Jechich them right onto the track of nursing them back to full health. Refusing to unsling his arm from around my shoulders, he guided me to one of the rooms on the second floor of the abandoned amphitheater. When Nebra was at its pinnacle, it was a hub of all sorts of shifters from all sorts of places. It boasted food wares, unique entertainment, and plenty of lodging, including small 2-room apartments that now served the purpose of hiding Moonwake fugitives. It was another place that Hazel and Son overlooked because they didn't think we would risk staying. They were too proud to admit fault and look anyway. The room Jara led me into was in fairly good shape after making it through a lively group celebrating my return, lots of claps on the shoulder, teary hugs, and kids trying to get me to pick them up, including an ecstatic Tara. He closed the door and pushed me down on the bed and crossed his arms at me. A moment later, Linus walked in and set a large bag on the side table. "You remember the skills of our beloved doctor," Jara said sternly. Linus started pulling out a roll of gauze, a little pack that I knew had gauze and needles, and a small bottle of dark liquid. "I'm not so injured that I need to be numbed with alcohol," I protested, leaning away from the doctor. "Prove it," he said in a tone that suggested tough love, threateningly holding up a thin needle. There were many a time that the Moonwake family's trusted doctor healed plenty of wounds. When I was a reckless pup, I suddenly felt transported to all the times he had to stitch me up, my mother holding my hand while I squirmed and tried to convince him that the gash in my calf would heal fast enough. I shrugged off my shirt, kicked off the sand, filled shoes, and rolled up my pant legs to my knees. The outfit was breezy, but had plenty of coverage against the swirling sands of the desert. I had passed out with the last image being Gemma's terrified face. I knew she was irritated by my own fear disguised as flippancy. Little did she know that I was equally annoyed by her stubbornness. Of course, I couldn't blame her for anything after what she'd gone through. Eric trying to bed her was just a nice word for a very bad word. The thought of him abusing her in any way boiled my blood so hot, I thought I'd burn up from the inside out. But now she was safe and I was impressed with her strength, refusing to leave Raisa, despite the she-wolf treating her like shit. Gemma was caring, obstinate, and intent on protecting those around her, all admirable and attractive traits. She was attractive, her eastern features were modest, but the waves of her sandy blonde hair before being thrown into madness were long and soft, and the blue of her irises matched the gemstones I used to collect on Moonwake's lake. The elegant shape of her eyes and her lips that when they weren't scowling or thinned in disappointment at me were soft. I had the sense that it would be easy to make her laugh in less dire circumstances. I just wasn't sure what her end goal was. Nor did it seem like I could easily get her to talk about the throne room and how I knew that she felt that tug around both of their hearts. Why was she so reluctant to address it, and why was she so resilient against my closeness? I just wanted to kiss Gemma Brooks. And apparently I wasn't hiding that very well. Jara and Linus's eyes widened at my injuries even though they had healed considerably. My shredded-up chest, courtesy of Cillian Cade, was covered in faintly bumpy, ropey tissue. My eye and lip for minuscule slices. I was very glad I could see out of both eyes, and most of the bruises had faded. Some bones still hurt, but Dr. Barron had already set them into place in the West. Scars were proof that you'd survived. They were things to be proud of, worthy of admiration and praise, but only if they were earned in battle. Escaping from the Hazel Coast Alpha after enduring literal torture was a thing to be pretty damn proud of. Tell us everything now. We can't have group story time, I deflected. Jara narrowed his eyes. You're still running on adrenaline, it's making you witless. I nodded once dramatically. Yes, I am. Then I sobered, meeting Jara's gaze with exhaustion. I would really love to sit and eat with. The Easterner interrupted Jara. You don't just look witless, you look like a desperate mate, eager to get back to his. I didn't try to hide it, it's that obvious. Jara and Linus both nodded. Let me assume my father's mind now. I was determined to still believe and make sure happened. Beta said, refusing to uncross his arm. You were kidnapped by Hazel Coast and are gone for days. You are tortured, or at least beaten up, because you put up one hell of a fight by Husilian Cade or the beast himself. Likely better, because if all this is from one Epsilon, I'll be very disappointed in you. Then you come across two consorts who could be spies for Herrick. And you have doomed us all by bringing them here. And he continued empathically, his voice raising and deepening when I tried to interrupt him.
Did you even think about how they could have easily followed you here? Like, did you forget he has trackers with noses like no other? Did you really fall for a pair or two of pretty eyes and decide they were worth more than protecting your pack your father would be?
I jerked to my feet, my face inches from Jara's. Don't bring Dad into this. I growled. He would just be glad I'm alive and unharmed mostly, and would put priority into getting those females the attention they need. They're former consorts now, and they hate Herrick just as much as we do, if not more. Considering they were forced to be breeders for him, goddess forbid he harmed Gemma for. She knows it. I continued as neither I nor Jara backed down. They deserve our protection and care. Like we said, I saved them. They saved me. Really, I barely deserve credit for anything. I started to slow down. All I did was cut up some Epsilon in a hallway, while they disabled Herrick, found an escape route, stalled Herrick and Cade, found an escape car, carried me to a doctor while I passed out from blood loss, and get help to get us all the way back here. What? I lowered myself back onto the bed and scrubbed my face. I needed a hell of a lot of time to process the past few days and even begin to accept it all. Wanting to kiss Gemma Brooks was not what I should be worried about right now. Jara and Linus were quiet for a moment, Jara finally seeming to realize how harsh he was being. He sat down beside me, his weight dipping the mattress, and put his arm around my shoulders again. We'll adapt, Tran, the way we always have. You're home, that's all that matters. I quirked a grin at them. Good to be home. It faded. Any word on Rion? Grimly, they shook their heads. Hopelessness gripped me around the neck like a vice. I could help two strangers, yet I couldn't save my own brother. We're working on it, said Jara, trying to sound hopeful. We'll fill you in after you recover some now. Sit like a good pup and let the doc assess you. After Linus touched up my wounds, grumbling at Dr. Barron's thorough job, I hopped in and out of a bath, making sure to scrub away every last grain of sand. Then I dressed in fresh pants and a shirt and let Jara take me down to the lunchroom with another lively group to squeeze through. Of course. I found Gemma across the room as easily as if she was right in front of me. My legs started to move before the rest of me realized. My heart started to skip beats. I heard her breathing hic. I started to grin, the least cocky I could do to please her. But it wasn't hard because of the joy that bloomed in my chest at the mere sight of her. It was unexpected, taking me by so much surprise that I almost tripped over myself. Gemma would probably love that tragic fall. Kara. My heart jumped for a different reason. Diana's voice speared relief through me. She bolted toward me from the crowd and flung herself at me into a hug, already weeping. Thank the goddess you're alive, she breathed against my neck, damp with tears. I hugged her back fiercely. It's going to take a lot more than Connor Herrick to kill me. We separated, and she tipped her head back to look at me, her lips smiling, but still wobbly. This is a new side I've never seen from you before. I shrugged. How'd you know I've changed? You look different just a little, but this smile, Diana prodded the corner of my mouth. I haven't seen you smile like this in a long, long time. Her expression turned mischievous. Did you find you like being roughed up? I barked an incredulous laugh. I can assure you, being slashed to ribbons is far from enjoyable. Do I look as delirious as I feel? Little bit. Figure. Might not want to look in a mirror for a while. Noted. Diana hugged me again and patted my cheek. Welcome back. Now we can focus on getting Rion. Won't waste a minute, I assured her. She slipped back into the crowd, waiting for a meal. I started toward Gemma's table without looking first. Only when I got within a foot of it did I realize both she and Raisa were gone. I swore under my breath, feeling like a complete idiot. Here, I automatically took the plate Chi offered me as she came to stand beside me. Don't look so disappointed. You only got her hopes up and then dashed them. I snorted humorlessly. She hates me. Coming over to her table won't change that. No, she agreed, shamelessly, but you can go have a reasonable talk with her. What makes you think it would be an unreasonable one? Because you've changed, Kael, Chi said. I looked down at her serious tone that made me sober more than anything else. Her dark blue eyes were deep with emotion. I don't know how, but you seem like your gravity is somewhere else. I've been back for an hour or so, and I'm coming to believe females have a sixth sense. JT munched on a strip of meat, and they think we won't make good alphas. Who says, fools, go talk to her. Listen to what she has to say, and think with your brain, not your... I walked quickly away from her with my plate of food. Got it. Thank you. They're in room 35. I knocked on the door lightly after I made sure there were 2 heartbeats. Gemma, it's me. Carol. Can we talk? Silence. Then her voice was directly on the other side about your lover. No thanks. Chapter 22. She's his lover. Gemma. The audacity, Raisa said with a shake of her head. I waited at the door until Carol's footsteps receded. Then I flopped onto my back on Raisa's bed instead of my own to stare at the ceiling that was in desperate need of care. I didn't even realize I'd gotten my hopes up. I confessed, feeling somehow more angry at myself than Carol, and the information he might forgotten to confess. He tried to make a move on me in dust, knowing he had someone waiting for him here. There were basic supplies in the small bathroom, and Raisa took her chance to utilize them to become herself again. She'd brushed her hair and braided it with a piece of cloth. With the water from a sink, she dampened a towel, cooling her flushed and puffy face. Now she was standing in front of the full-length mirror, twisting her torso with her shirt lifted to see if she could notice a bump. He's not worth your time, sweet, she said. I sat up, but what, she asked, not unkindly, sighing at herself before sitting beside me. She definitely seemed more like herself, even if it was fractional. Sweet Gemma, something happened in that throne room, and I overheard him ask about it. So if you don't want to tell him, tell me. The 2 of us had gone through hell the past 2 weeks. I could trust her. It wasn't like she was going to run and tell Kael behind my back. I inhaled deeply, and on the exhale, I said, you had to stop me from running to him. Yes, I sensed you were about to do something stupid. but I just thought you wanted to help him just because you were nice, not a deeper meaning. Well, when you sabotaged me, I said it with fox anger, to which she smiled wide and suggested he fix you me. Oh, us critical to our escape, wasn't it? Raisa interrupted, with a smile. You have to admit, it had to feel good. I sucked on my teeth, trying not to relive the experience of terror and fury, hearing the snick of metal and the crunch of bone through skin and muscle. Salman. Then I thought of all the horrible things Connor did and said, I didn't do what I did for me. I did it for Raisa and all the other girls and all of his victims. None of them had a chance to defend themselves, so maybe they could find comfort in knowing Connor wasn't completely invincible. And maybe I did find some satisfaction in proving that a little anyway. Connor said the smile Kael gave me. Whoa, lovers, Raisa remembered. Now serious and thoughtful, and that's troubling you. Definitely I fiddled with my braid that wasn't near as good as Raisa's. I didn't think so. But I felt something. Raisa smacked my hand away and undid my braid to redo it. Let me guess. You're afraid he felt it too, which is the cause for the smile and why he's been pestering you. I know what longing looks and sounds like, Gemma, that obnoxious male. Wah, she sighed. He just wants to figure out what happened just as much as you do. But he really shouldn't have tried to pursue you when he already has a lover. I chewed my lower lip. Was I too harsh? What if it's nothing, sweet? Raisa said, finishing my braid. I think you two should talk, but keep in mind his almost infidelity. Figure out what the hell the bastard is thinking. But I just shoot him away. Raisa sighed heavily. You have no experience with males, do you? It's obvious, I think. Yes, it is. I recommend you not chase after him. Let him come to you, otherwise it will look like your pride is hurt. And you're desperate. Kael didn't seem like the kind to think something like that. But I didn't tell Raisa that, but she was right about pride. I shouldn't have to apologize for anything. Here's an idea. Raisa stood and hooked our arms together at the elbows. We'll go tour the place. You'll come across one another, and then it's natural to have a conversation from there. Don't forget that he has to approach you first. She led me out into the hall while I contemplated telling her that this all seemed roundabout and unnecessary. Who came up with these unspoken rules? I changed the subject. Enough about me. How do you feel? Still nauseous. Right away, I could sense her about to deflect, and I was right. Comes and goes, she said flippantly. Seeing a doctor seems fine. I am proud of you, you know, and I have many things to thank you for, Han. But, you know, I'm too uppity to do so. We exchanged genuine smiles, and I coveted her callousness, even though others found it somewhat offensive. I needed blunt honesty to get through the day now, and Raisa was my pillar. I just hoped she could see me the same way. I let her guide me through the upstairs apartment complex as we attempted to retrace our steps. Though there weren't many wolves, we still received distrustful stare. When we turned a corner, we found ourselves in a wide living space. A small group of pups was sitting on a mattress, in surprisingly good condition, as they listened avidly to Jara as he waved his hands in the air. See it? Can you imagine? He asked with wonder in his deep voice. A lake-white sand, all around its blue waters, blue as JG's eyes. We'd go fishing for silver carp and push each other in with big splashes. I once even pushed JG in the pups, gasped, making Jara grin wider. She got her revenge, of course. How one of the girls asked excitedly. Well, she pushed me in too, but she also threw a fish at my face. Oh, how satisfying it was. JC sighed in satisfaction, appearing beside Raisa. All right, all of you scamper off. It's adult talk time. Oh, well, they all complained, but after they received a stern look, they did indeed scamper off. A very young one, however, waited until Jara kissed the top of her head and pushed her gently along after the others. She toddled out, giggling. Sitchati told us, thankfully gesturing to a long couch she and Jara sat in the opposite one. How are you two feeling? Ready to see the doctor, Raisa said at the same time I said, I don't know. While JG was still warm and welcoming, Jara was still cold and tense. He wouldn't stop glaring at me. Only when his sister, they had to be twins, slapped his arm did he look away. I apologize for my brother. It's only that he cares for his pack, Jara grunted, but JG continued, we will send him your way. Saya, Chima. What can we do to make you feel safe here? She should learn about your history, suggested Raisa calmly. You were talking about Moonwake, an Easterner who has no personal allegiance to any pack could stand to learn that the West wasn't always so devastated by war. That sounds like a wonderful idea. Jaishi beamed Raisa. Let's get you to our Dr. Luna's Jara. You teach Gemma boast all you like. Oh, I will. He grumbled as the two left. I squirmed in my seat while he leaned back in his, eyeing me down his nose. So, you're the one who plunged a knife into the beast of the West's back. I nodded. And saved my alpha from within inches of losing his life. I suppose, if you did something like that, I don't expect you to be shy. Own up, sea lover. How many times had I gotten in trouble for acting first? Thinking later, how many times did Carrie have to hold me back from saying something I shouldn't? I was too confident for my own good, and I had never faced severe consequences. The moment I set foot on Firthport was the moment I was no longer the Gemma Brooks that Opal Springs knew. I'd lost sight of myself and being stolen away by the enemy, a lost lamb amongst wolves. I'd forgotten my own teeth. Now that I was free, I couldn't go back to who I used to be, but I could redefine myself. I could be as elegant as Raisa and comforting like Jichi. And less of an annoyance to Kael, who really hadn't done much to deserve my bad attitude. I set my jaw and nodded firmly. Yes, I stabbed and I saved. I didn't realize it until now, but I should be proud of myself for risking my life for others in need. Jara's brows rose a fraction, a small spark of interest. That's more like it. Do you want to know what your saving of my godson did? I nodded again. He readjusted himself as if readying for an epic tale and began. Carol Liviana, the sixth son of Adelio and Mona, was never supposed to bear the crown of his father. Kitron was firstborn and trained to be as good an alpha as his father. Moonwake wasn't just a pack, it was a kingdom, and it reigned for 100 years, its borders taking up the majority of the continent. We and dozens of packs lived in harmony. There was no reason for war or even strife when we were damn near close to utopia. There wasn't anything that wasn't thriving. Our capital crescent was a marvel of green and white and blue, more beautiful than can be described. There was nostalgic wonder in Jara's face, memories playing in the depths of his eyes, and my heart ached for the loss of a home. So magnificent. But there's always a bad bone, he continued, the nostalgia turning dark. There was word Hazel Coast and Sun Mountain packs were starting to quarrel about resources. One claimed the other was withholding. The other just wanted to invade to steal what wasn't theirs. Adelio and I set off personally to oversee the issue and help work it out. It went well, or so we thought, for a couple of years. They were at peace again. We thought all was well, as they were cleverly storing up armies. But their target wasn't each other anymore. Jara sighed deeply. Hazel and Sun attacked in the dead of night. It was so systematic that we weren't prepared. We'd lived in peace for decades. We didn't realize how low our guard was. They set fires, killed, and stole faster than any of us could process. During the attack, we realized that it wasn't Connor's father leading the attack, but himself. We didn't expect him to show up on our doorstep, drenched in the blood of our packmates. To make my old heart not so weary with words of the past, I'll skip the gruesome half the Livianas escaped. Half didn't. Kitron was the last to die. By that time, Carol was the oldest heir. The second kit's heart stopped. There was a new alpha. I had my mate's hand in one, Carol's in the other. Chi had Rion on her back as we fled. While we overestimated our own warriors, we still had escape routes and bunkers out of the city. We became fugitives. As we moved from place to place in secret, we lost too many lives. Herrick and Morven tracked us down and hunted us like we were game. Moonwake was overtaken and eventually left destitute. We couldn't go back because it's still rigged. Kara was only 15 besides me and my sister and his own siblings. It was difficult to see him as any kind of leader, even though the burden of bringing glory back to our pack, bringing us back to Crescent, was too heavy on his shoulders to understand. 2 years ago, my mate gave birth to our daughter Tara. I figured that was the toddler. It wasn't long after did a routine resource run go wrong. Jara had to stop when his voice strained. You don't have to tell me, I interrupted, kindly reaching forward. He moved his knee out of my way. She was walking back to our hideaway. I was forced to watch from a second-story window as Hazel Epsilon killed her without hesitation. I made sure Carol didn't see, but when she didn't return, I didn't have the heart to tell him that those bastards took his sister's body with them until a month later. I was fighting back tears. The cocky male who showed up drenched in blood nearly died and knocked gently on my door to simply talk. He had gone through a different kind of torture when he was just an adolescent. I opened my mouth to tell Jara I was sorry, realized it was the last thing he wanted to hear, and closed it. Hey, Jara, a voice called, and I jumped when I recognized it. It was the female who hugged Kael so passionately. I didn't realize how small she was, barely five, but taken aback by the assuredness she held as she walked toward us. She was very pretty with her vibrant blue eyes and bountiful black hair, and smiled briefly at me before turning a worried look on Jara. No reports from the patrol. He sighed heavily and squeezed her hand. We'll find him. Her lower lip trembled, but she nodded. She gave me a little wave and then walked away. Who is that? I asked too quickly. Jara raised his brow. Diana Hala, Rion's lover. Chapter 23, Moonlit Confession. Gemma. Well, if I didn't feel like shit before. I learned my lesson, don't assume. I blinked out of my brief wallowing when Jara laughed. You look like you just got kicked between the legs. Kael said you blew him off because you saw him hug Diane. Are you Easterners easily prone to jealousy? I felt my face heat in embarrassment, but I couldn't back down on my strive to be confident. Not that I'm aware of. Jara leaned forward and braced his forearms on his thighs. He was the biggest male I'd ever seen, built tall and wide at the shoulders, muscled, but it was still a different kind of big than Connor was. He wasn't pure muscle, and he seemed more inclined to hug than to bully. I could see him being a loving father that I could trust. Up close, his skin was textured from all the years in the desert sun, and while his pulled back hair was white, his stubble of a beard was brown. The distrust in his dark eyes, they reminded me of the ocean at midnight. A romantic deep blue gave way to honesty. And I was ready for tough love. Things are different here than in the East, he said. I'm not sure just how different, but I know you need to grow some thicker skin. We can't blame you for your ignorance, but you seem like the type who would rather learn about the world around you than ignore it. I have also decided you are not in league with Herrick. I couldn't help but smile, knowing we could put each other at ease. Was the stabbing him the determining factor? Jara barked a laugh as if taken by surprise at my attempt at humor. You know, it just might be. Now, let's talk Raisa. My smile faltered. It wasn't my place to reveal anything behind her back, so I spoke carefully. She was kidnapped by Connor years ago. She was the daughter of the Duskfall Alpha. Jara's mouth thinned, tragic. She was Connor's first consort and took care of all the girls in his harem. Girls, he repeated in a snap. I withheld my wince. Yes, none of them could be older than 20. Sick bastard. She was trapped there for years, but somehow, I smiled internally. Somehow she found her mate. Who's the father of her pup? Her mate, Bran, I said. Good. We don't want demon spawn here. How far along is she? I think she said 2 months. Do either of you have plans from here on out? The question caught me off guard at the same time, even though I knew it was lurking in my mind already. I hadn't thought this far and figured days ago that it would be fruitless to work up any kind of plan when I couldn't predict what would happen in the next hour. I had a goal, certainly, but reaching it was another story. Get home. Back to Opal Springs, Oceanside. My throat thickened saying those names. My home, back to Lynn, to my parents, to Carrie, to my bedroom, and my bed. Back to familiarity, back to the sea with the sand between my toes and the sun, warming my skin from above, and a trip to Liar Haven to punch the shit out of Havloglow. I couldn't return with what I set out to do, make myself useful after my father made me feel useless. Bring pride back to our family name by bearing an alpha's heirs and find freedom and independence. I had so many regrets, but now was the time to make things right. Sounds nice. It is. Jara grunted with contentment and leaned back into the couch again. I gave you my story. Now you tell me yours, and prove you don't owe allegiance to Sun, like Oceantide is known for. I had to earn the trust of the remnants of Moonwake citizens. I had to tell the truth and show that they could trust me. I wasn't afraid to tell my story, maybe a little ashamed of my naivety and the cruel deal made by my own uncle, but it would be worth at least one other shifter to know what I had gone through. When I finished my woeful tale down to the moment I'd arrived here, Jara seemed stunned, speechless, but that was only going off his slightly raised brows and the considering twist of his mouth. I held my breath and waited for him to say something. Well, Gemma, he sighed, our stories can't be compared, but we can share sorrow and hope. Jara stood and I followed suit just as he brought me into a bone-crushing hug. Welcome to our humble home. Enjoy our meager offerings, sleep on our pathetic mattresses, play with the pups, and... Okay? I mumbled against his shoulder. Oh, right. Jara set me down and I saw him transformed. If you're wondering where Kael gets his rambling trait from, look no further. I laughed and smiled, and it was the first genuinely happy reaction I'd managed since I'd left Lynn. It felt good, really damn good, because for a moment, everything seemed perfect and bright. Tell me more stories, I said, feeling as excited as those pups he had been talking to earlier. Don't indulge me, I'll never stop. Jara slung a huge arm over my shoulders and guided me out of the living room, but I have time. Let's broaden the audience. Jara took me to the theater where adults were supervising a gaggle of pups that were running around and hiding under chairs or playing dead on the runway. When they saw us, they yelped with joy, tugging on his sleeves and begging for more stories. I'm coming. He boomed with laughter. I have to show Gemma here how I'm something of a master storyteller. She's not from around here, said an older pup. She's really pretty, said another, who I smiled and winked at. He blushed. She's from the east. Zerol explained with a tone of wonder to captivate them, but she came here to give the beast of the west a good what for. Their eyes went huge at that, all whipping toward me. What did you do? They clamored. I laughed nervously, but with Jara's encouraging nod, I confessed with confidence. I stabbed Connor Herrick in the back with a dagger. They were frozen with shock for a moment as it was processed in their young mind. Then they burst into a louder clamor, grabbing my sleeves and pant legs, asking a dozen questions and demanding more information. I found myself laughing again, feeling lighter than I had, and weak. I'd never been one for kids, but seeing and feeling their innocent enthusiasm, even during a war where they were being hunted and killed, made a soft spot in my heart ache with emotion. Hope, maybe some kind of gladness that even in the darkest times there was good to be found. I knew that whatever I told them would spread like wildfire to the rest of the pack, so I made sure to keep out the sad or gory details while also not trying to embellish the truths. Connor came right at me, I said with dramatic flair as they all sat around me in a half circle on the theater stage. He had me cornered, and he saw I had the knife, and he thought I couldn't move faster than him. But you were guessed a pup excitedly? Yes, and when he crashed into the wall, I spun around and jammed it right into his back. Then I ran for my life to get my friend who protected me against him to... Where does Kael come in? The boy who called me pretty earlier demanded, bouncing on his knees. I remembered his feeble knock on the door and his plea, his battered body lying on Raisa's floor as he looked up at me and joked even as he was hours from death. My heart started to pound when I conjured his face in my mind. Scenes from the past few days, blurring but for the ones when I met his eye. My smile was sober now. He defeated a whole hallway of Epsilons to clear the way for us to escape. Even drove Connor's own car all the way to the next town. He saved me and Raisa. He was very brave. The pups chattered amongst each other, beaming with how proud they were of their alpha. It was just another thing that made my guilt grow that I had been so cold toward him. All right, let's not crowd her. Jara glanced at me and grinned, so let's make her the star of dinner time. Surprisingly, I enjoyed the attention. Telling the story for what already felt like the dozenth time made it easier to process and accept the events. It kept me from sinking into the darkness of the tragedies. It kept at bay my wondering if the rest of the harem girls were okay or if they took backlash from Connor in a raid. It stopped me from dwelling on whether or not Bryn had sacrificed his life in a grand fashion, hopefully landing some kind of blow on Connor or Cillian. Most of all, I hope they weren't about to burst in and find us and ruin Moonwake's last hope. Raisa sat beside me as we all ate our meal. Even though I regaled, it was her that drew attention. Her poise had returned in full since returning from the doctor, color back in her face and her eyes. Not so red. She kept the slightest coy smile, and her green eyes had a knowledgeable glint that enchanted anyone who met them. It was good to have her at my side. She even added her own tidbits that made me hope it was helping her cope, too. The only thing that dimmed my mood, by the end of dinner, was truly taking a toll on the genuineness of my smile, was that Corella was nowhere to be seen. When the adults began to usher pups to bed, I started when JG elbowed me gently. I'll show you where he's hiding. The back of the building had a long row of small balconies that looked out over the empty desert and its horizon. Night was approaching and the temperature was steadily dropping from stifling to chilly. Crawl was leaning his forearms on the railing when I lingered on the threshold. His hair was completely washed clean of blood and dirt and had been trimmed. He must have done it during dinner. It was a purposeful kind of choppy trimmed short on the sides, white with faint streaks of gray, reminding me of a full moon. I knocked my knuckles on the door frame, still really hated doors, still hated knocking to catch his attention. CEO world, and we both blurted out, I wanted to apologize for being a DT joke. I wanted to apologize for being unreasonable. We laughed, and I felt awkwardness fill the space between us. I couldn't meet his gaze, and I noticed he looked at the ground as he cleared his throat as if it could banish the awkwardness. I patted over next to him anyway and leaned my forearms on the railing. A few seconds later, Kael did the same, our elbows only a few inches away from each other. For what seemed like forever, Neither of us spoke, and I had a feeling his mind was rifling through a dozen things to say, just like mine was. Both of us weren't sure who would speak first. Of course, we decided to talk over each other with perfect timing. The desert is beautiful. You look nice. Oh shit. I whipped my head to stare at him, blinking in surprise. His ears flamed and he cleared his throat again, averting his gaze. Sorry, I laughed breathlessly, fighting a shy smile. No, it's okay, thanks, I get. Yeah, the desert's decent. I like the horizon better. This is the first time I've seen it in a while peacefully. I mean, I looked out at it. The hues of sunset were fading into a gradient of blues, the silver moon shimmering in the darker shade. I guess it's pretty different from the sea. Completely different, I murmured. Kael told me about what happened to you in your pack. I'm really sorry. I shouldn't have taken you at face value or assumed what I did. Kael was quiet for a moment, and I was afraid he would reject my apology. The ribbon on my heart tugged, but at the same time, it was content. Each second that passed, I felt more comfortable in his presence. I sensed his body start to relax, too. You didn't have to say it, he said softly, but your apology means a lot. I caught him looking at me in my peripheral vision. When I turned, he looked away. Remember, when I said I was acting like a Dichu cack, apparently. Kael barked a low laugh. Yeah, like that. Remember when I told you it was a farce to keep away existential dread? Well, I think I can calm that down now and see who you are underneath. He nodded, now looking at the closeness of our arms. Hopefully, I'm not always snarky. I itched to scoot closer but refrained. I like the snark wand to a degree. I can keep it in moderation. He suggested. Deal, so. Do you want to talk about the throne room now? Kael finally met and held my gaze. He blinked in surprise as if seeing me for the first time, and I realized this was his first look at my complete cleanliness too. Your skin con is nice. I gave him a full smile. So underneath the snark, you're just a bumbling idiot. He mirrored my expression, and when it really wasn't out of snarkiness, it was the infectious kind of smile, and I felt something flutter in my stomach. I'm just discovering it too. Kael, hi Gemma. A bubble seemed to pop around us, and we glanced back at Diana, standing in the doorway sheepishly. Sorry, I didn't know. It's okay, we said together, both of us smiling even wider. I didn't miss the knowledgeable gleam in the she-wolf's gaze. She pretended otherwise. I was just wondering if you wanted a tour of the city tomorrow, Gemma. I asked Raisa, and she told me she'd rather stay here, so I hesitated, looking to Kael, who shrugged. You should go. Diana's been to the east. You could bond over it. I kept hesitating, finding myself wanting to stay to be with him, but then I remembered we weren't going anywhere else soon, and the tour would only be for a little while. I turned my smile on Diana. I'd love to. Chapter 24, Break the Rule, Gemma. I learned Moonwake enjoyed 3 main meals daily with every wolf present, no exceptions. Raisa and I were fetched by the pup, who called me pretty yesterday. I let him hold my hand to guide us down to the dining hall, where all the tables had been merged together. Archie sat on my left side and Raisa was on my right. It didn't take me long to catch Kael's gaze at the head, Jara and Jaichi on either side of him, with Tara bouncing in her father's lap. We exchanged smiles that we quickly hid when several caught the interaction and focused on our meal. After Kael dismissed everyone and his packmates all scattered to their own devices, he started to walk toward me with a question in his eye. I made it only a few steps before Diana jumped in front of me, beaming dazzlingly. Ready to go? She asked excitedly. Raisa laughed delicately beside me, having not missed the disruption. I had told her briefly what happened last night on the balcony. She had been surprisingly supportive, even retracting her advice on saving face, and had quickly assumed and was correct. I secretly admitted that both Kael and I just wanted to be in each other's company without interruption. Jara caught Kael's attention to draw him away. I didn't fail to notice the big male's serious expression. Raisa pushed me forward. Gently, go explore, sweet, breathe in that dusty air, and eat some cactus. We'll still be here when you get back. Then she turned to Diana. There was almost 2 feet height difference, but that didn't stop the shorter wolf from meeting Raisa's cool look with her own. For being so tiny, I sensed just as much strength as I would from someone as big as Jara. She could definitely hold her own. Let any harm come to her, and I will harm you right back in kind. Raisa, I protested. Diana only nodded, unaffected and impressed. We all need wolves who love enough to kill. I promise I'll take care of her for your sake. Oh, as she glanced at me wryly, and for Kael. Raisa's cool expression warmed into satisfaction as she smiled at me. She's smart, have fun. With a kiss to my cheek, she toffed the doctor whose name I'd learned was Linus. It seemed she wanted to cling to him as I wanted to cling to her. Diana clasped my hand and started to drag me out of the dining hall. Come on, we'll have fun. We don't even have to hide your hair. You blend right in. And that's a good thing, I clarified as she led us back to the amphitheater. A young female caught up to us, and Diana accepted 2 long pieces of gauzy white fabric and handed one to me before she let it unbunch and rested it on her head. It lay like a veil. She took one corner and pulled it across her face to tuck behind her ear. The female then handed Diana a black hair clip that she used to secure the fabric in place. When she turned to hand me my own clip, I marveled at the small change a piece of cloth made. The lower half of her face was visible, but it was fuzzy and would be difficult to define certain features. It made her blue eyes bluer and contrasted against her thick, dark eyelashes. She was incredibly beautiful. Maybe it was easy to assume a handsome alpha would be attracted to such a gorgeous woman. Damn, I just mentally called Kael handsome. Well, he was, especially when he wasn't drenched in blood. Well, now that I thought about it, there was beauty and savage ruggedness. What are you thinking about? Diana asked, deviously demure. You look like you're imagining something dirty. Not the dirty you're thinking about, I wanted to tell her, but instead shook my head and said, I'm just thankful for baths. That's all. She said, clearly not believing me. Here, let me help you. After her telling me that I desperately needed a lesson in grace, Diana and I slipped out of the cellar door like thieves in the night. Except that it was mid-morning and horribly warm, which was why we were wearing the white veils to reflect the sweltering sun from burning our heads while covering our faces to prevent inhaling too much sand, with the dual purpose of hiding from enemy soldiers. We have it easy. Diana told me after I helped put the planks back in place, neither of us resembles Moonwake. I have blue eyes, but it's the white hair that condemns them. It's better to be safe than sorry. Come on, stick close. Pretend like you know exactly what you're doing. That was easier said than done, but I remembered that I wouldn't be meek. This was my chance to hone my acting skill, so I mirrored Diana's purposefulness out of the alleyway and onto a dusty street. There were shifters talking in hushed tones, pups chasing each other with scant clothing. Elders sitting against abandoned buildings, wrapped in enough cloth that only their eyes could be seen. My chest squeezed so hard I couldn't breathe. I looked up. There were more boarded up doors and windows than ones that weren't. Shattered windows, wood scattered haphazardly, lost belongings, dropped and forgotten. It was tragic. It was appalling. With the aid of Cyrus Morven, Connor had done this. I could see it in my mind's eye, him grinning evilly as he ordered his Epsilons to wreak havoc on innocent wolves. He orphaned pups, stole daughters, killed sons, and hurt mothers and fathers. Connor was a disgusting tyrant. If there were any words more foul than that, I wished they were worse. I didn't get angry fast or often, but when I did, it was for a very damn good reason. But knowing what Connor had done, also knowing He had many more war crimes that I wasn't aware of yet to a single city alone. It made me burn hotter than the desert sun with fury. He deserved a lot more pain than silver in his back. I should have tried to kill him. The dark, intrusive thought shocked me out of a daze. I realized Diana had stopped and dragged me aside, gripping my arm with worry, making lines between her brows. I just met you, Gemma, she said wearily, and you're already freaking me out. What are you thinking about to make you look like you want to murder someone? She paused, realization dawning in her eyes. You were thinking about the beast, weren't you? I wasn't making a positive first impression on someone who I knew could be not just an ally, but a friend. She made a good impression at least. I shook my head. I'm sorry, this. I was at a loss for words, gesturing vaguely at all the desolation. Diana's grimace was heartbreaking. The way the elders describe it, the sacking happened all in one night. Everyone goes to bed. Then the next morning, their home is in ruins. I didn't know what else to say, so she continued, I'm from the east, Seeing all of this was a wake-up call. I came here and wanted to leave as soon as I possibly could, but I followed her gaze as it looked out to the street. Then she held up her hand, wriggling her fingers, for me to notice the metal ring on her forefinger. It was rudimentary and unadorned, but I immediately knew that it held significance to her. But then, she sighed, I found Rion and my whole world changed again. I knew I had to stay, if not for him, then for his pack and what they stand for. Hope. For what I asked softly. Diana quirked a smile even though it trembled with threatening tears against, hope against all odds. What did you think we're content just hiding in one place or another? We're the resistance, Gemma. Connor has to be stopped, and that's how we've survived this long. Our pride, our sheer, will keeping us going until we can get back home, back to Moonwake, and rebuild the kingdom of peace. I felt the urge to hug her as I had when Raisa showed me a glimpse into her heart. That's very brave, I said in quiet awe of her. She was from an entirely different world, and just one wolf had changed her entire perspective. Her love for him turning her allegiance to a pack on the brink of extinction. That impact of that love and loyalty. What a difference it could make. Diana winked. We need to be, don't we? Which means we need to break the rules. A trill of trepidation shot through me. Is that okay? I thought we needed to be discreet. She took my hand again and pulled us out of the alley and boldly onto the street. That's exactly how we're going to break them. That doesn't make sense, I told her as all of a sudden we were lost in the stifling crowd of the square. Oh my God. I clasped Diana's hand as if my life depended on it. Bodies jostled me in all directions, shouts and barks, pounding my eardrums and threatening to pierce them. My sight filled with a dull rainbow of browns, blacks, and dark blonde, the essential colors of the desert. My brain felt overloaded within seconds. But just as soon as we plunged into the throng, we stumbled out of it onto a different street. It was still crowded, but it was more controlled. Shifters waited at vendors on either side, and the smells of food and spices and overpowering dyes slammed into my nose. Diana pulled me off to the side. You look like you just staggered out of a dust. She laughed. I had to raise my voice to be heard over the commotion. I feel like it. You said we were going to have fun. We will. I didn't think you were the shy type to hide in your shell. I knew she was just goading me, so I decided to indulge her and adopt her guile. Wolves don't have shells. That's the spirit. Come on, having not let go of my hand, even though it was sticky with sweat. Diana led me once again into chaos, shouting over her shoulder, "Do you like candy?" I love it, I called back, transported back to when I was young and Carey and I would sit on the edge of the square's fountain and suck on candied almonds and fruits. Then today's your lucky day. Diana skidded to a stop in front of a vendor, making me nearly collide straight into her. She whipped out some kind of paper money in exchange for a small bag. Then she flounced into the alleyway, where it was much quieter, and handed me a piece of candy from within. Try it. I popped it into my mouth. Its strong flavor exploded on my tongue. Delicious. I mumbled around it. Diana beamed sugar-coated beetle. Now let's break the rule. Chapter 25, we're not mate. Gemma. I spit the candy onto the ground and blurted beetle. Oh, you consider bugs candy? Diana threw her head back and howled with laughter, then tossed one into her mouth and sucked on it loudly. Yes, yes, we do. What else would we consider candy? I came up short of an answer, so I just wiped my mouth with the edge of the veil and shook my head. No offense. None given, none taken. Now, how do you feel about breaking the rules? She asked with an edge of insistency. I narrowed my eyes at her. Why do I feel like you dragged me out here for a certain reason that wasn't just for fun? Diana glanced away, guiltily eating another candy beetle, no reason at all. Inconspicuous young foreigner. I didn't know whether to be mad, intrigued, even more suspicious, or a little bit enticed. It was quickly apparent that Diana didn't have Innocent City exploring on her mind. But what would she need me specifically for? We just met. I began trying to sort out what to say without sounding too negative, and you want me to... True guilt creased her brows. I'm sorry, Gemma. I just got excited. Have you ever been in love? For the briefest of briefest moments, Kael's face came to mind. Then I dashed it away quickly and said, not really. I mean, no. But there are things that you love so much that you would die for. Right? I pictured everyone from home, my parents, Carrie Lynn, and all my other cousins, even my uncle Alpha Baran, not have no clue. But those other shifters who'd hurried to my mind, yes, I'd do anything for any of them. My being here proved that. Yes, I said. Then you'll understand, Diana continued, voice darkening, that when the chance to save them arises, you take it. I took a subtle step back from her. Diana, I'm not gonna lie, you're freaking me out. The shadow in her eyes cleared when she blinked. Oh, I didn't mean to. I just tossed. I'm sorry. I'm desperate. Did Jara or anyone tell you what happened to Rion? I was on edge now, but said they mentioned him. He's Kael's younger brother. He's only 21. I'm 23, by the way. And after the sacking of Moonwake, he's always acting out. He isn't content with sitting around. He thinks we're wasting time and not acting soon enough, claiming their father, Adelio, or even their brother, Kitron, would have fought back by now. I have always agreed with him, and we've not made much progress on our own, but we're starting to make a name, and it's gotten him in trouble. What kind of trouble? I asked warily, wondering if she was about to bring me into it too. A group of adolescents came jostling into the alley. Diana grabbed my wrist, and we fled out the opposite end. She swerved left around the corner, pulling me into a run. And then we swerved toward a building with boarded-up windows. She ushered me inside the narrow door she opened and closed and locked it behind me. That did not earn any trust. This isn't the trouble part, she assured me as we stood in a dark foyer, unclipping her veil. I said as I followed suit. This is the good part, maybe a sad part. It was too late to back out now, so I followed Diana into the darkness that smelled like dustwood and a low. But it wasn't long before we came into an even bigger foyer with a skylight that poured in the burning sun ray. Arranged in concentric circles were frameless mattresses, some occupied by blanket-covered bodies, only their heads visible. All around them, shifters in white meandered with purpose. The smell of plants, both familiar and not, permeated the tense air, lending to a sickly, sweet, restrictive aura. I also detected the scent of blood. I looked down at Diana. Where are we? Nebra's only clinic. Her voice had shifted back to that dark, sober tone, the victims of heat stroke, the homeless, the injured as a result of Hazel or Son hurting just because they can. I come every day to offer my knowledge of medicines. I don't know if you've ever heard of it, but I went to healer training back in the East. I think Oceanside was only 100 miles or so away. I started training there when I was 10 years old. I had never heard of it, but I knew it was another reason. Diana made a life here. She was a helper and a healer. It seemed wrong to ask. Yeah, this is the good part, because it was definitely the sad part. Come on, she said, gesturing for me to follow. Diana padded over to one of the females bustling about and asked any word. The older she-wolf shook her head. I've asked every soul who stumbles in here, dear. Can you help today? We're running low on. Who's this? She noticed me belatedly, standing back a few steps. It's okay? She's okay? Diana said quickly, putting a hushing finger to her lips when a few shifters glanced our way. She's an Easterner like us. Her name's Jamia, and she's staying with us at, where? After she saved our alpha from the brink of death, she added with the return of her deviousness. The elder's eyes widened. Welcome to the West.
Thank you for saving young Kalali. Waved my hands in protest. No, I don't deserve praise. He saved me first.
Isn't that heroic of him? Diana gushed, batting her eyelashes at me. Before I could give her a glare, the elder sighed. Yes, he is shaping up to be a fine young leader. He should find a mate that would strengthen the pack's faith in him. Diana snorted. That's the last thing he wants. He's oddly chivalrous and wouldn't want them to be put in such a dangerous position. In a time like this, for some reason, my chest tightened. I didn't want to decipher why. Anyway, Diana continued, I can make a run. I need to go there anyway. I'll go get the list. As the elder hurried off into a different room, I whirled on Diana. What the hell is going on? Diana, I want to be happy to help, but I feel like you're getting me in over my head. She patted my shoulder as if that would comfort me. Lovely Gemma, you should learn to expect the unexpected. You can't be prepared for everything, but you can pretend you are at least. Look it otherwise. You'll be eaten alive. That makes me feel perfectly at ease. Thank you. Diana beamed. You're welcome. Here we are. The elder returned and handed Diana a piece of paper with text from top to bottom. Be safe. Will you tell Bly I said hello and to actually stop by once in a while? You know she won't. Diana laughed, but I'll tell her anyway. I started to follow her when the elder called, then tell her I'm coming over there. Oh, she'll love that. We walked back to the foyer, but instead of leaving the way we'd come, Diana veered to the left through an open doorway, right down a corridor, and to yet another boarded-up door. Through this one, however, Diana ushered me in, after moving a few boards to squeeze through the hole. In utter darkness, I heard her shuffling around and swearing as she fumbled around for something. I jumped when she swatted my leg. You're standing on it, she sighed. Step to your left. I obeyed. Standing on what? Metal screeched and grated on stone as something slid open. Trapdoor, Diana grunted before a loud bang assaulted my ears. Hop it. I'm starting to think you're all more crabs than wolves, I said, not moving. Crabs, she repeated incredulously. You'll crawl into any dark space with ease. She started laughing, and it was so contagious that I had to fight a smile. It was hard to stay mad at a carefree shifter like her. A crab, she giggled. Well, they do it for safety, don't they? That's what we need to do here. That's what I'm worried about. Okay, I'll go first. It's not too far down, but just don't land too hard with your knees. I heard her hop into what I assumed was a darker hole. Come on, Gemma, she called from not too far away. Unless you'd rather not have an adventure. Adventure. The word rang in my head, as if I hadn't heard it in weeks. It was the one thing I wanted most. I didn't hesitate this time. I dropped down, my heart leaping into my throat. Diana caught my arms to steady me with another laugh. There we go. The power of a trigger word. I assumed we were in an underground tunnel. It had the same smell and aura as the one under Hazelstone. I wasn't fond of my own comparison and whispered hoarsely, "Wherever we're going, let's go there now." The smile left her tone. "All right, take my hand." I came to accept the fact that my life had become about doors. Someone or myself knocking on them and hand-holding. I didn't know whether it was funny or just a ridiculous joke. We were quiet for only a minute or so as we trekked over uneven ground. I felt gangly as I tripped on clumps of dirt or stones, and Diana had to catch me. She didn't seem to mind because there was something else going on in there. Ryan's not my mate. I creased my brow even though she couldn't see it. What? Yeah, we're just tied together. We have been for years, ever since I jumped off that train into this trash city, and every week that passes, I hope the mate bond clicks into place. But every week, he just does something that almost gets him killed, and it's taking a toll on everyone. Especially me. I've become his keeper or something, and I love him. I told you I'm taking this chance to save his ungrateful ass, but it's getting to be too much to handle. You see me well, not right now, but do you think a skinny thing like me can do as much as one of those 6? I considered her rant, my sympathy going out for her, and said, "You're going to try." Diana barked a laugh. "I knew I liked you. Hell yeah. I'm going to try. If I can't use brawn, I'm going to use brain, and my brain has had a lot of time to think things through." I pieced more things together, telling Jara there were no reports from a patrol asking that elder for any word had been clued. "He's in trouble, I guessed, and you're taking it into your own hands to save him." Smart, Gemma, stop here. I wasn't sure how she found it, but Diana stopped where a rectangular sliver of flickering light shone through, seemingly cut out from the dark stone. Suddenly, it was covered by a shadow password, came a deep voice. "I wish the beast was dead," because Diana said confidently. There was another violent scrape of metal on stone, and a moment later, a section of the wall slid open. A huge male appeared from behind it, looming over us. "Hey, Cole," beamed Diana, winking at him. The menacing-looking shifter winked back, offering a crude grin. "Hey, little wolf." The grin vanished when he saw me. "Who the hell is this?" Diana's arm looped around my waist. Gemma Brooks, Easterner, former consort of Connor Herrick, savior of Kael, the first successful escapee of Hazelstone, and under the protection of Moonwake. She is also my new friend and is going to help me with my law-breaking chores. Cole didn't question her. He dipped his head and stared at me. A ripple of fear passed through me as I waited for his response. Chapter 26, The Underground. Gemma. A tunnel with its own secret entrance guarded by a big, scary male who required a password. I was so in over my head. When you said adventure, 'cause Diana, I hissed as she tugged me through. I didn't think it would involve, well, an underground market, she asked innocently. "Would you have come if I told you that's where we were going?" "Definitely not." "Well, don't worry, you're with me, which gives you very good immunity." As I tore my glare away from the tiny, confident she-wolf, with her chin lifted proudly and her stride daring anyone to question her purpose, my breath was punched right out of my lung. Past Nebra, it was like a miniature Nebra, an entire unground city. The ground that made up the first street was rocky dirt, some places damp or harboring puddles from the water dripping from the stalagmites, some so low I could reach up and touch them. Lamps were somehow bolted to most of them, throwing flickering light and shadows, making the place eerie and mysterious. On either side of the street were vendors and an owner or two of each talking loudly to what I assumed were their customers. Beyond those, crude square and rectangular mounds stretched further than I could see and probably imagine. It reminded me of dust, everything made from dust or dirt with the transforming power of water mixed in. While crowded and loud, Nebra was far less chaotic than its mirror up above our heads. But it didn't make me feel any less stifled. Diana strode down the wide pathway without fault, and somehow I was hurrying to match her stride. I realized it ended with a large facade. It had no adornment, but it felt like an important building. Maybe it was because 4 large males were guarding its tall door, 2 on each side, and all looking like they could shift into their wolf form at any second and tear out your throat. But they didn't bat an eye when Diana approached. No, one of them opened it, as if it was her own home. She hemphed in satisfaction and skipped inside. I hurried to keep up before the guards could scrutinize me. I was tired of looking at new foyers and rooms and what they were decorated with, so I just tuned it all out to watch Diana's loose curls bounce with her every motivated step. I jerked out of my daze when a new female voice exclaimed, "My little moon, how are you?" She was tall and lithe, oddly willowy for a wolf as she bounded toward Diana. I wasn't sure where she came from. Diana released me and met her halfway. The height difference was almost comical as they hugged fiercely. "It's been too long," this she-wolf said, putting Diana at arm's length to look her up and down. "No new scars. That's good. Also rather boring." Her voice lilted with a thick accent. It made me realize that all the shifters I had met so far here also had distinct tones that I hadn't registered. Certain letters were either drawn out shortened or omitted completely. My drifting mind was brought back by Diana pulling me forward by my upper arm, Lee. "This is Gemma." "Gemma, this is the queen of the underground alpha of the Broken Tooth Pack, a master trader in all things legal and not Blai Salhan. Her mother is the female we just met." Alta. The resemblance was striking. So golden, brown eyes, dark brown hair falling to her chest, features sharp but made soft by curiosity. She also reminded me of Raisa with her irises bright with intelligence and body poised for controlled movements. And a female alpha, hell yeah. Blay tilted her head at me, looking me up and down, and then smiled, eyes curving upward when she did so. "Lovely to meet you. Diana only brings certain wolves down here. What makes you interesting?" I glanced at Diana, feeling disconnected from myself. She liked singing my praises more than me. The tiny wolf noticed my sudden dip in mood, her eyes sparking with recognition, but it was gone in an instant. She beamed at Zuli. "Let's just say we owe her a great deal and should be in awe of her and her deed." Blamey's brows rose, but she didn't press noted. "What can I do for you?" "Oh, let's sit, shall we? I sense you have more than one topic to address." "In fact, I do," Diana announced, following Bly, making sure to drag me along by my wrist. "Your mother says hello, and for you to visit her." Of course she did. Ali sighed, but she knows it's dangerous for me to make any sort of appearance there, no matter how brief. We went into a small kitchen and sat at a circular table. Bly and Diana leaned back in their chairs, perfectly at ease, while I found myself stiff and formal. "Then she threatened to come visit you," said Diana. Bly gritted her teeth. "She's so damn persistent anyway. What brings you here?" "I think you can guess one reason." Bly's expression became piteous. "There has been no word of Rion, Little Moon. There's been little talk of Sun in general. Hazel, however, is causing daily trouble ever since they caught Terrell. Speaking of, is it true? He's back? Is he even alive?" "He's home," Diana assured, and I knew Bly didn't miss the physical dejection now, rolling off her very skin. "You can thank Gemma for that." "Oh, tell me more." Diana caught Bly up on every detail she knew, and I filled in little gaps. When we'd fallen silent, Bly's expression had gone neutral, but in her eyes I could see her thoughts racing, calculating. All very interesting. I'll be sure to send out feelers for any commotion Herrick might send if he comes here. We are all in jeopardy. She said it just casually enough that it could have been brushed aside, but as it sank into the muck of my thoughts, I could only begin to imagine the implication. My guilt and horror must have been written all over my face because both females said together, "It's not your fault." I didn't want to argue, but I said most of it is. I'm the one who stabbed the one wolf who proved he can destroy an entire city. Blee tossed, "We are roaches, Gemma. They can try to kill us, but we're too stubborn to let that happen. We will not stand for it." I bit my tongue to stop myself from asking if they were ever going to act on their own words. 12 years was a long time to either sit around or gather the forces Moonwake needed to take back their home. Wasn't that what Diana said? Rion's belief was too. Besides, Blee continued, gaze sharpening, "You should be proud, you stabbed him." The news, while damning to us, can also help us shifters who thought Herrick was invincible will know that just an ordinary female can find a chink in his armor. I can try to prevent that news from spreading, but there's never stopping the power of gossip. Blee leaned forward and tapped my nose with her forefinger. "You just might start a revolution, Gemma Brooke." It wasn't the best way to end a conversation, but I didn't have much of a choice in the matter. The two females stood when Diana pulled out the list Alta had given her, and once I simply followed them. We exited through another door that was guarded by two more large males' bodyguards. I assumed to protect the Queen of the Underground. We came onto a different street, this one less like a market and more like a casual browsing place. Shifters gathered in twos or fives, chatting quietly and amicably, even giving small waves to Blee and Diana as we passed. A few pups darted around chasing each other, and elders took a stroll down the street. Question after question filled my mind. Again, it seemed I wasn't hiding my confusion very well. "Do you know what an underground city is?" Gemma Blee asked over her shoulder. "Definitely not. We are the remnants of packs whose homes have been destroyed. Just like Moonwake, my pack Broken Tooth was founded by my great-grandfather, and we are lucky to call ourselves the founders of Nebra. We are the sanctuary for the homeless, the widows and orphans, the retired soldiers, and," she smirked, "plenty of spies and thieves." On the most innocent level, Diana added happily, "She has wolves out gathering herbs. We can't grow here." There are a lot of things we don't or can't have in Nebra, so Blee's the one who organizes what or who we need to get those things, no matter where else they might be. And then they're sold or traded. There's a money system that keeps it all going, explained Bleka, but loyalty and secrecy are the main currency. Diana and Blee went from stall to stall and indeed traded the non-physical for herbs and other basic medical supplies in a wicker basket. They were in their own little world, but occasionally glanced back at me. I was content tuning it all out, but I didn't expect my attention to turn toward the want to return to the amphitheater. Kael had wanted to talk about what had happened between us back in the throne room. I assumed with certainty, and I was finally ready to face the probability of what I thought that ribbon connecting our hearts meant. "You look like you need to relax and have some fun." I blinked Carol's annoying smile out of my mind's eye and instead found Diana and Blee grinning at me. I immediately knew they were going to suggest something wild. "You can have that down here," I questioned, glancing at the dull adobe and shifters dressed plainly. Blee snorted. "Of course we can't." Simplified, they took me to a bar. Now bars I was familiar with. Back in Opal Springs, I'd embraced the chaotic, tightly packed atmosphere, but it was mostly because I was drunk off my ass. I was always able to let go of my daily troubles, which hadn't been many or stressful, and easily lose myself in the adrenaline and enjoyment of alcohol. Relax, have fun. I could do that, if only temporarily. Blee was one of the tallest shifters in the crowded, sweaty room. She carried 3 chipped glasses and handed one to me and Diana. I met her toast when she announced the downfall of Hazel and Son. The rest of the bar cheered and downed their own drinks. Bly and Diana knocked theirs next. I instinctively followed suit and nearly choked on it. "What is this?" I croaked. "Prickly pear. It's sweet, isn't it?" asked Biley. It was very sweet and very delicious. It was just different. I took another sip and licked my lips, smiling at the 2 females, eagerly waiting. All right, I can get used to this. I did, but my usually high tolerance did not. Before long, I was giggling and stumbling and failing to keep the alcohol in my cup. I wasn't sure who kept refilling it. I danced with strangers who were equally drunk or just indulging my ridiculousness. Everything blurred together, and since everything from the walls to the clothing was brown or black, it was hard to distinguish one thing from another. I could easily be talking to a chair, thinking it was another shifter. At some point, I slammed right into a rock-hard chest, and my glass was pried from my finger. "Hey," I slurred in protest, fighting back weakly. Hands slid down my arms, down my torso, gripping my hips to steady me and bring me flush against their body. I registered that someone rested their forehead on mine. "I didn't pin you as an unhinged drunk," Kael said, with soft amusement. The second I knew it was him, the world sharpened into focus. I tipped my head up and rested my chin on his chest, smiling lazily. "Want to join me?" "I'd rather do something else." I giggled. "Oh yeah, what?" "Kiss you." Chapter 27. Nothing I want more. Gemma. I woke up feeling like I was back aboard the ship that had taken me to this damn continent, swaying and rocking. But this time I was lying down on something soft and cushiony, staring up at a dark adobe ceiling with thick swirling lines carved into it. I assumed it formed some sort of image, but my eyes did not even like glancing at it. I groaned and closed them, rubbing my temples where a headache pounded, making my head heavy and stuffed. It showed no sign of fading, so I tried to focus on the rest of me, which wasn't much better. I felt like I was back in Epsilon training, getting battered from unblocked punches like a stuffed dummy and limping back home with my skin blooming with bruises. All I wanted to do was either throw up or pass back out, but a soft snore made my spine stiffen. Even though it hurt, I opened my eyes and glanced to my left. Sunlight was streaming in from an open window and made a pattern of light on the floor, mostly covered by a woven rug. On that rug with only a pillow was Kael. He was fast asleep on his stomach, his face turned toward me, mouth slightly open, and I saw a small dark spot on the pillow where he had likely drooled. I couldn't help my relieved smile. I had no idea where I was, but at least I was with him, and if he was asleep, that had to mean we were safe. Then I frowned. The last place I remembered being was the bar in Nebra. How did Kael know how to get down here, the way Diana made it seem? She was the only one who knew about the secret city. Maybe he had followed us, or he visited with Diana, or maybe even Rion. I stopped my thoughts before they could race too fast, and I actually hurled my guts onto the nice rug. Just when I thought everything was fine, I had to do a double take at Kael. Why in the moon, goddess as hell, was he shirtless? I jolted into a sitting position. Never mind the violent spinning to find myself wearing only my underwear and an oversized shirt, Kael's shirt. I jumped to conclusions faster than a gull catching a crab. Did Kael and I have sex? I refused to let my mind make any assumptions. I got out of bed. Rather, I rolled off a pile of blankets onto my hands and knees and had to pause immediately to force down my stomach's contents. Then I crawled over to Kael and shook his shoulder, probably more roughly than need be, Kael. I hissed, "Wake up." The alpha goddess. It was odd to think of him as one, considering the state we'd met, groaned, and stirred. Just like at Dr. Barron's house, I got a full view of his back. My mouth went dry at the ripple of muscle from every small movement. The glide of his shoulder blades and the knobs of his spine leading down to the dimples on either side. Clearly visible thanks to the low-slung waistband. My gaze would have kept roaming further down had Kael not rolled into his side to give me a lazy smile. "Good morning, beautiful," he mused. "Excuse me." His eyes went wide and he spun onto his knees and held up his palms in surrender. Sorry. The surprise was like a punch to the gut and I couldn't hold it back anymore. Everything I'd ever consumed in my life seemed to empty itself out of my mouth. To say the least, the rug was ruined. Kael hooked his arms under mine and pulled me away before I could pitch forward. My head lolled onto his lap, my whole body as limp as a doll, and I moaned from a mixture of embarrassment and pain. "Sorry," I mumbled. The pads of his fingers gently scraped my forehead and cheeks as he pulled aside stray hairs that stuck to my sweat, dampened skin. I managed to look up at him as he smiled down at me. This one, subtle and amused. "Don't be, we've all been there. Prickly pear is definitely one to look out for." He handed me a glass of water from a table in the corner, and I rinsed out my mouth. Then he rolled the carpet where I'd puked up and moved it aside so we couldn't smell it so much. There was a quick flash of annoyance in his tone. "I'm going to have a word with Bly about giving it to you in the first place. You know her. All kings and queens know each other," he said, slyly. Even though my teeth felt and likely looked unsavory, I smiled. "You don't look like you'd be a king." Kael's brow rose. "No, what do I look like then?" My mind was still hazy and his tone made me want to mirror his teasing, but hangover me was not very clever. Not like one. "Fair, can you sit up?" "I think so. Just hold my hair back." "It doesn't have any puke in it, does it?" I asked, worriedly, afraid to check myself as I managed to sit up and hug my knees to my chest. Kael obeyed and told me, "Just sweaty. I can show you where the bathroom is." I could have wept with relief. My senses were slowly starting to dehaze and I felt more disgusted by the second. I opened my mouth to speak, but let out a surprised squeak when suddenly Kael ripped a strip of cloth off his shirt sleeve, the shirt I was wearing. He then started smoothing down my hair before tugging it gently. Then his hand slid down my arm to take my wrist to guide it toward him. "Hold here," he murmured, his fingers brushing mine as I held my hair in a loose fist, my heart now skipping beats. There was a little fumbling, fluttering fabric against my skin, and a decided tug when Kael used the strip to tie a knot around my hair to hold it together, and up. There, I used to watch my older sisters do it, and then they taught me I can't braid, though. So, don't ask. I ducked my head to hide my smile as if he could see. "Thank you, Kael." His fingers skated down my back, sending a shiver through my aching body. Kael cleared his throat. "Sorry, I didn't mean to." "It's okay," I said, looking over my shoulder. He was inches away, and my breath hitched at his rugged beauty. The storminess in his eyes was calm, just a cloudy day, and his lips were parted slightly when he looked at mine. I couldn't tell if it was because he liked looking at them or if I had any vomit smeared on my chin. I quickly swiped my arm over my mouth. It came back clean. Bless the goddess, Kael. I breathed. "Did we have sex?" Kael laughed under his breath and shook his head. "I'm assuming that's why you woke me up. Our outfits beg the question." Yeah, I agreed with a hint of sarcasm, but I was busy being mystified by him, still too under the influence to care too much. "That is my shirt," he informed me, "because when I carried you back here from the bar, I set you down and you started stripping." I felt my face flame. "I did not," I said, in disbelief. Kael dipped his head. "You did so." A memory returned like another throb of my headache. I pointed accusingly at him. You said you wanted to kiss me, I remember that. The skip in his heartbeat gave him away, but he still said I didn't, though because you were drunk, and I didn't want to take advantage of that. I chewed the inside of my cheek, torn between gratitude at his chivalry, embarrassment at my apparent lack of control, and a little sliver of selfish excitement. I felt like a giddy adolescent with her first crush. Kael wanted to kiss me, but I had to be a responsible adult, so I cleared my throat, which still burned from the stomach acid, and decided it was for that reason alone that I couldn't let him any closer. Kael was watching me so intently that it was difficult to work towards sobriety. Do you still want to? I asked, unable to meet his gaze. My mouth still tasted sour to me, so it would to him too, if he did. Am I sensing interest, Gemma Brooks? He purred, cocking his head to the side. Do you not hate me anymore? I narrowed my gaze at him, but stepped away for a moment to go into the bathroom and properly rinse my mouth. When I returned, the rug was gone from the room, and he was standing back near where he'd been before. I couldn't help but go to him, ready to answer his question. Now, I scowled. I never hated you. You just annoy the hell out of me with that stupid smirk. You said you also like snark in moderation right now. Rate me. Am I giving too much or too little? All of a sudden, too much, I simpered, sticking my tongue out. Very adult. What if I lower my voice like this? Suggested Kael, dropping his tone, making it husky and smooth, and asked Gemma, do you want to kiss me as much as I want to kiss you? Whatever I was going to say, the words were snatched from my throat. He happily took advantage of that by winking and rising onto his knees, offering his hands to take. I think we can agree you should get cleaned up and sobered before we do anything. You confused me so much I whispered before I could stop myself taking his hands. Kael pulled me to my feet at my own pace so I didn't get too dizzy. Then his arm looped around my lower back to rest his hand on my hip. For the briefest of moments, I wished he'd pushed up the hem of his shirt so his fingers touched my bare skin. He looked down at me. The top of my head reached his chest, so he didn't have to tilt his chin too far, but I felt small and safe in his half embrace. I can't pin you down either, Gemma, but I know this feels right. What feels right? I was afraid that if I spoke too loudly that I would scare him out of talking. Kael turned me so we were chest to chest. I felt his warmth soak into my shirt. It wasn't ideal for my current state, but the last thing I wanted to do was stop what was happening between us. Whatever it was, his breathing was steady, but I could tell he was trying to be just as careful. His hand on my waist slipped down an inch. I held my breath. His other hand moved tentatively toward my other side, but I could already sense he wanted to touch my exposed thigh. I gave the smallest of nods. Kael understood immediately. His fingers skated along the hem of the shirt, but an uncharacteristic jolt of impatience shot through my bones, and I stepped impossibly closer to him, bending my knee forward, so his fingertips bumped against the front of my thigh. His touch sent a wave of shivers down my spine, and a gasp escaped my lips. And then Kael swallowed, watching our points of contact, and then met my eyes. Touching you. When I touch you, Gemma, there's nothing I want more. Chapter 28, Bathe for Two. Gemma. Kael, I rasped, my throat tightening, tears threatening. You promise you're not joking about this? He swallowed hard again, and his voice was still husky, but he was no longer trying to entice me. This isn't something I talk about lightly, Gemma goddess. I love saying your name. I rasped a delirious laugh. I like saying yours, Kael. Without waiting for permission, both of his palms slid to my backside and yanked me close and up. My limbs moved instinctively, arms locking around the back of his neck as my legs hooked around his torso. My breath shuddered out of my chest, and I tilted my head to the side so Kael could brush his first kiss to the underside of my jaw. It was like a spark to tinder. He started a hungry, frantic path down my neck, growling when the shirt collar only allowed a small patch of skin. So he moved back upward, loving the curve of my jaw, nibbling my earlobe that drew another moan from between my lips, and I clung to him harder, teasing the hair at the nape of his neck with my fingertips, scraping lightly, and I felt him shudder, his own fingers curling into the flesh of my backside with a low growl. "Tell me you felt it," Kael panted, still kissing everywhere he could in the throne room. "When you saw me, when I saw you, tell me you felt the tug in your chest." This wasn't how I imagined this conversation would go, but who was I to complain? Yes, I confessed, just as breathless, like a ribbon around my heart. Kael pulled back to look at me. His eyes were glazed with desire, but they were still fully aware. A ribbon. That's what I was calling it, too. I blinked, trying to clear my thoughts enough to process what that meant, but all I wanted to do was let him keep kissing me. Luckily, he had a better idea. Later he suggested, and I couldn't tell if he wanted to figure it out or just keep eating me up. Later, I agreed. I could use a bath too. I hummed my chest, seeming to fill with air, making me feel light and ready to burst with joy. I'd be okay with that. I'm good at sharing. Kael's mouth quirked in the cockiest smile I'd seen yet. It made me fight back a delighted squeal. He had gone from a gentle savior to a suave romancer. I didn't mind either, but I found myself favoring the latter. I clung tightly to him when he broke into a brisk walk, and the lack of distraction was a gateway to sudden doubt. There was still vomit on the rug, wherever he put it, and what if this was Bly's house out? Oh, goddess, what is that smell? Oh, I heard Blee's voice from outside the room right before the door opened, and she asked, "What's going on in here?" Kael froze and muttered, "Shit," burying his face in the crook of my shoulder. Every muscle in my body tensed, ready to resist, whimpering, "Don't let me go. Please, Kael." So quietly, only I could hear, he murmured, "Only for now. Gemma, I promise." Blee's voice was sharp. "Stop canoodling and explain what's going on." Kael set me down as carefully as if I was an heirloom. I unlooped my limbs and felt a cold absence where his warmth had been. Then his hand slipped into mine and I felt a little better, but still ashamed to even lift my head toward Blee. So, "I don't have much of an explanation," Kael said, then cleared his throat of its raspiness. Blee snorted. "I can think of a few. Is this vomit on my grandmother's hand-sewn rug?" She was holding the rug in her hands, still rolled up. I couldn't get away with lying. "Yes." "I'm sorry," she barked. "I couldn't quite hear you." Kael stepped in front of me suddenly and accused, "You said we could bring her here after you let her drink. How many pints of alcohol?" "You're blaming me in my own home. Do you think you have a higher rank here, little alpha? Go ahead and defy me. It won't fix anything. Just get out of here. Diana's waiting for you at her apartment." Diana had a living space here. To answer each question, Kael snapped, tugging me with him as he stalked forward. "Yes, I am." "No, I do not. No, nothing can undo Gemma's honest mistake. Fine, we will leave. Thank you," he added aggressively. "I will go visit my friend." I finally looked up. Blee was the picture of fury with her foot tapping, hip cocked, one hand on her hip, and her teeth bared in a snarl. She scared the wits out of me when just hours ago, or however long I had been passed out for, I was in awe of her presence. "I'm sorry, Blee," I began desperately, but she just looked away and held up a hand. "Pray your honest mistakes comes out of one of my most prized possessions. You're lucky I'm gracious enough not to sick my epsilons on you." They still guarded the exit Kael pulled me through out onto an unfamiliar street. When he deemed us a safe enough distance away, He stopped and turned to me, now holding my hands between us. Are you all right? I was a lot of things at the moment I wanted to say, but could only manage. I'd still like a bath. I could tell he was put out by that, but nodded, indeed chivalrous enough to not display selfishness. Can you walk, or are you too queasy? Now here was an opportunity. I can be carried. Kael rolled his eyes, but I coaxed out a grin. I am capable of doing the carrying. You aren't wearing pants, after all. I gasped and yanked my shirt down. Luckily, it fully covered my ass, but a good half of my thighs and down were fully exposed, including my bare feet. I swore under my breath, feeling a different kind of miserable. I didn't know where my clothes were or if he'd been the one to change me or blah lie. Arms under, Kael suggested. I nodded. He scooped one arm behind my shoulders and the other under the backs of my knees, lifting me up with ease. It was completely natural to rest my head against his bare chest. Lethargy catching up to me, despite the thrill of what we were about to do, was still pulsing through my veins. I had been willing to get into a bathtub naked with an also naked Kael. We hadn't even kissed yet, and we were about to jump straight to body on body. Now that we've talked about the throne room, Kael said slowly as he carried me toward Diana's apartment, we should talk about what we almost just did. Can we wait until I'm not hungover? He rested his cheek on the top of my head briefly. Of course, definitely. After you don't smell like vomit. Who smells like vomit? Kael stopped and set me down gently in front of Diana, whose hands were set on her hip. I would assume you were an accomplice to Bly giving her alcohol she's not used to, he said with an edge of anger. I clung to his arm to keep me grounded. It's okay, I told her with a wobbly smile. That's how I used to party back at home. You definitely were having fun, laughed Diana. See Kael. She not fine, he barked, making both of us flinch. You should have been watching her, not refilling her cup. I can't believe you took her down here in the first place. It's dangerous to expose her to the shifters down here. You betrayed my trust too, promising you'd only take her to the vendors for food. Diana's voice sharpened too. I wouldn't have taken her along if I knew she couldn't handle herself. But she can, and all that happened was a normal hangover. Besides, you came to her rescue only because he sensed something was wrong. We all looked up when Jara appeared behind Diana. He dropped his hands down on her shoulders to make her feel guilty, which showed plainly on her face. Isn't that right? She sucked on her teeth and mumbled, yes. I turned to Kael. You knew. What? I just had this nagging feeling that I needed to find you. He told me, arm looping around my waist and pulling me against him. Jara and I came down together, ready for a threat, only to find you dancing with strangers and spilling your drinks on them. He didn't say it unkindly, but it was pointed at Diana with disappointment. She couldn't meet his eye. It's okay, I assured the males. I'm okay. Don't be mad at Diana or Bleak because I relinquished myself. I just wanted to let go after everything that's happened recently. Immediately, their expressions softened into worry and sympathy, even though it didn't look like Kael was fond of my faint self-destruction. It's over now, I continued, squaring my shoulders, and I would really, really like a bath and a real bed to sleep on, if you don't mind, and a toothbrush. Yes, let's get you cleaned up. Diana reached for me, but Kael held me back. I'll take care of her from now on. He scooped me up again without warning and squeezed past her and Jara into another new building. He climbed a few stairs, turned down a short hallway, and set me into a small room where my eyes went straight to a long wooden tub that he quickly filled. It's cold, but that's what's better. With the hangover, whatever works. I automatically started to strip, but then paused when I saw him still standing behind me in a mirror's reflection. I glanced at the water for a split second, imagining us both under its surface. The tub was definitely large enough, but forced myself to follow the sensible path. It's probably better I do it by myself. Probably I can scrub behind your ears, though. I snorted. I'm sure you could, Carol, but I think I need to be alone now. It pained me to say that, because when I turned to face him, he didn't hide his disappointed longing. Another time, Carol, I murmured. His voice was just as mournful. I like when you say my name. I'll still say it when I'm sober. After an indulging long bath, despite the shockingly cold water, I dried myself off with the towel hung on the door handle and slipped back into my bra, a shirt and pants that I was blessedly confident that I'd be fine without underwear for now, because no way in hell did I feel like putting used ones back on. Diana had recovered my clothing from bollocks for me. I managed to tie my wet hair back in the strip of fabric and padded down the stairs, where I heard voices. Carol, Diana, and Jara were sitting around a short table with drinks in hand. Carol had put on a shirt disappointingly and looked up when he saw me, lips breaking into a wide grin. All clean, mostly better, I announced, my heart leaping with joy when Carol crossed the room in only a few strides. I could still use a nap, though. The bed is big enough for two, he said with a sideways smirk. Diana pointed an accusing finger. Not on my bed. Carol opened his mouth to protest when there was a knock on the door. The three shifters froze. Tension filled the room in an instant. Jara crept toward the door, seemingly ready to attack if necessary, and peeked through a small hole in the wood. He sucked in a breath. F-Chu-Key. He breathed. Who is it? Diana hissed. Jara flung the door open. Rion. Chapter 29. You can't trust him. Gemma. I wasn't sure exactly what kind of trouble Rion was, and based on Diana's withholding of information, but it seemed like it could wait long enough for an emotional reunion. Jara stepped aside, clearly stunned for Rion to come inside. He looked around in fond appraisal. Never thought I would miss this place, he huffed with a grin that easily marked him as Carol's brother. Their resemblance was as undeniable as Jara and JG's dark gray eyes, choppy white hair, and handsome facial proportion. Looks the same as it did months ago? He glanced between the three shifters, gaze skipping over me. Well, don't I get a hello? Diana's sob was strangled as it burst from her throat. She threw herself at him so hard and fast that Rion stumbled back, holding his arms around her in a fierce embrace. When her limbs locked around his shoulders and waist, faces buried in shoulders, chest trembling with sobs, steps stumbling toward a couch whose edge Rion's calf ran into, falling back onto it. That didn't stop Diana from meeting her lips to his with the passion of desperation. Rion brushed her hair out of her face, and I glimpsed tears shining on her cheeks. You stupid male, she wept between deep kisses, voice raw. You stupid, stupid, stupid bastard. Rion's voice was rough too, not stupid enough to never come back for you, my love. I'm home safe, and I love you, my son. Diana pulled away lingeringly, and together they sat up, her legs still wrapped around his waist. She stroked his cheek with her knuckles, wiping away his tear streaks, her chest shuddering with each breath. If you leave me again, I'll hunt you down just to kill you myself. Rion leaned down to kiss the hollow of her throat. That's so romantic. When he lifted his head, he said, Oh, look, you two are here too. How are things going? What did I miss? Diana climbed off his lap, pulling him to his feet, and punched his arm seemingly as hard as she could. How dare you be so insensitive? What I'm trying to make the mood light. Carol crossed the room and crushed Rion in a hug that lifted his feet off the ground. You reckless idiot. Rion's throat bobbed, and he patted his brother's back. Call me whatever you want. I'm not leaving ever again. You better fucking mean that dumb for brained obnoxious, unfunny. Okay, we get it. Kael put Rion at arm's length. I could only see Rion's face, but I assumed Carol's was as red and tear-streaked as Diana's. Don't ever try to be a hero again. I swear, or I'll kill you myself, a sense of theme already. Carol released him with a somehow good-natured shove. Go apologize, he said, jerking his head toward Jara. They embraced next during his welcome back, gift arriving as a loud smack upside the head. If your father knew I let you pull that stunt, he would have strung me up on a lamppost by my ears. That's oddly specific, noted Rion humorously even when he still sounded choked up. I'll sit down now. He sat on the couch, Diana clinging to him while Jara and Kael sat across from him. It felt like I was pushed to the sidelines, even though Kael did briefly introduce me. But I didn't mind in the slightest. It almost made me smile, in fact, because the reunion of loved ones was between them and no one else. It was how I imagined me returning to Opal Springs and finding Kael and my parents waiting for me. So I just backed off as quietly as I could to the upstairs and sat on them, just out of sight. It felt wrong to eavesdrop, but I couldn't help my nosiness. Start from the beginning, Jara ordered, and don't skip a single F-chucking detail. Oh my goddess, you never swear, Rion gasped. I winced when I heard him being punched again. Fine. His tone turned serious. I was on patrol with Raithy and the others. We turned the corner and 5 Sun soldiers were right there. I literally ran straight into one. Goddess, send them to hell. They were wearing metal armor with the sunbeams in the middle of their chests, like some stupid horn. It got me real bad. I didn't see what he showed, but they all gasped in surprise. I assumed it was a wound. Even though I was nearly skewered and bleeding out on the ground, they yanked off my hairpiece and demanded to know where the rest of my kind was and who I was. I told them that I would die before I confessed anything. They tried to convince me they would heal me in exchange for our location because those spikes were tipped with scorpion venom. Diana inhaled sharply while Kael and Jara swore. Raisa and the others left me for dead, continued Rion darkly, the bastards, and coward. I felt like I was dying because I actually was. Very quickly, very painfully, I told them again, no way in hell, and my last dying words would be "fefchu," because they didn't like that. So, they knocked me out. When I woke up, they cured the poison, and I was lying on a bed with Cyrus Morgan leaning against the bedpost. To say the least, the psycho didn't want me over to share a pint. They reacted again, and even my jaw dropped. I knew what it was like, suddenly looking across from a warlord. He must have been terrified. What did he do to you? Diana demanded. Real-eyed Kael snarled. They let you go? Jara asked in disbelief. Rion sounded confused. What did Raisa lie about? He said you were ambushed by Sun, and they held all of you at knife point and demanded our location, but you claimed you were the alpha, and that's why they took you. My jaw dropped again. Those cowards, spat Rion. They saw me hit the ground, and then they hightailed it. As I said, they did ask me to fess up, demanded, really, because you can imagine they're anything but nice. Anyway, they took me to save me, only to throw me in some cave with only a short wire fence between me and a pit of angry vipers. My chest tightened. His encounter with the dangerous alpha was shaping up to be much more dire than mine was. Oh my goddess, breathed Diana. Did you get bit? Show me. Rion's voice quieted. Not a single nip. What? How? Kael demanded.
You didn't.
I didn't give anything up. I didn't compromise our pack. I swear on our brothers and sisters. His shout was followed by a few beats of silence. I held my breath until Rion spoke again. But I did make a deal with him. Neither Kael nor Jara said anything, so Diana whispered, What deal, Rion? The couch squeaked when he got to his feet. I just got back. I'd really like to wash up and go see everyone. I thought it was safer to check here first, so... No, Kael barked with aggression. I didn't expect from him. You're gonna tell us what deal you made with our second worst enemy, Rion Liviana. You are my brother and my heir as Alpha. We are going to fix... There's nothing to fix, Rion shouted. I already fulfilled my end. It isn't fixable. What's done is done, and I can't take back what I did, so just let it go. I didn't realize he was storming toward the stairs until he nearly collided with me. Shit, who the hell are you again? I didn't think he'd been paying attention when Kael introduced me. I scrambled to stand and stammered, "I'm Gemma. I was stolen by Connor." His gray eyes flashed with surprise and then went cold. Good, someone I can share trauma with. Excuse me? Without waiting, he shoved past me. I stumbled, slipping on the smooth adobe, right into Castle's waiting arms. As if I'd been harmed, he pulled me against him once again, chest to chest. Instinctively, my arms wrapped around his torso. "I'm sorry, Kael." I dodged Diana as she raced up the stairs after her lover. Rion, wait. A door slammed and Diana's fist hit it once. Rion, please. Not now, he yelled. A moment later, she came down the stairs, wiping her nose on her sleeve. She swallowed hard and said, "Can I interest anyone in a bowl of fruit?" Kael and Jara sat talking quietly and heatedly about what to do next, while I sat beside Diana on the steps, one arm around her shoulders, the other supporting a bowl of desert fruit on my thigh. She made sure there was no prickly pear in it. "I can't believe he's back unscathed," she said hoarsely. "I'm so glad he's alive, but he was gone for a week." There's no way to know what really happened because he never really tells the truth about anything. "He seems different." She inhaled sharply and looked at me. "Did you change from who you used to be before after you escaped Hazelstone?" I was taken aback by the question, but I already knew my answer. Yes. That didn't seem to make her feel better, but she nodded. "Cyrus is a monster," she whispered, almost inaudibly. "He wouldn't just let Rion go when he wants to know what's left of Moonwake just so he can destroy it. Just like Connor. I think they're both afraid. Moonwake was a force in itself, so I've gathered at least. The Liviana dynasty is powerful and ancient, and I think that if Sun and Hazel know they're alive, even just Kael himself, we're just a hidden threat that can rise up to challenge them. Maybe not stop the war, but change its course somehow. I leaned forward a little to see Kael's back and thought I was ready to willingly strip naked and bathe with an alpha goddess. I wanted to slap myself in the face. Then I remembered Billy's words, "You just might start a revolution, Gemma Brooks." I rubbed Diana's shoulder. "Let's focus on one thing at a time. Rion's home and safe, right? Shouldn't we celebrate that?" She shook her head. "Not when we know he's made a deal with Cyrus. If he let Rion live, it was a steep price to pay, and my instincts tell me that it's changed him, too much traumatized him, I think, to willingly tell us. So soon, at least." Gemma and Jara called quietly, "Come on over." I set my bowl down and guided Diana to the couch. I met Kael's gaze first. He was already watching my every move. My heart ached at his expression, dejected, miserable, angry. I wanted to sit in his lap and let him cry into my shoulder. "Kael, listen, you two," Jara said, forcibly drawing my attention. "We love Rion with our very souls, but for right now, we cannot trust him." Diana whimpered. "He's chatty and cheeky, but somehow he learned to be an expert at hiding secrets." Jara's voice was grim. "Right now, we need to let him think. We can let it go and hope things go back to normal, but we have to keep an eye on him at all times." He looked at me. I've known him since the day he was born, and he is as fiercely loyal to our pack as the rest of us. So I'd like to say he didn't give anything up about our existence or even location. But when it comes to survival, us shifters will do anything. I couldn't imagine the toll it would take on someone who couldn't trust their own packmate, much less their own brother. But now Kael wouldn't look at me, and the conversation ended when we heard Rion come down the stairs and ask, "Is this fruit for me?" Chapter 30. Finding home, Gemma. It was hard to pretend like everything was okay when it clearly was not. Rion was pretending like he hadn't just been. Apparently driven back from Cyrus Morven's stronghold and dropped off at the outskirts of Nebra. Diana was pretending to be okay with that, her arms locked around his waist and refusing to let go as we left to put Nebra behind and below our feet once again. Jara had Diana's supply bag resting in the crook of his arm, leading us back to the entrance, pretending like he didn't want to leave the apartment until Rion confessed every detail of his capture. Kael was pretending to be wholly grateful for his brother's return. But he wasn't hiding the simmering tension under his skin very well. I was the one to slip my hand into his. He started looking at our interlaced fingers and then brought my knuckles to his lips, brushing a kiss to them. My heart was ready to burst out of my chest. Something changed between us very fast and very strong. He was right about us being right. Every touch, every meeting gaze felt as natural as breathing, and I selfishly wanted him and his full attention. More than that, I wanted to help. But what could I possibly have to offer? We strategically returned to the safe house one by one instead of in a group with a reasonable amount of time in between. Except for me, of course, holding on to Diana as she led me back. If I had been left by myself, I would be lost in the maze within no time. The three males wore white veils that Diana had given them, that she kept in her apartment to hide their hair as much as possible. And without trouble, bless the moon goddess, we were soon climbing the stairs to the closet of the amphitheater. Just like with Kael's return, Rion was met with tears and laughter. Jackie hugged him tight enough that I heard his spine pop in a few places. When I saw Raisa padding down the main aisleway, I swear I would have leapt right over the entire row of 13 seats just to get to her. Instead, I ran down the side aisle, around and back up to meet her. She hummed a laugh when we embraced our arms tight around each other and murmured against the top of my head. "I missed you too, sweet," she meant. I pulled away with my throat, suddenly tight from holding back tears, when she saw my face, her sea glass eyes sharpened. "What happened?" she demanded, looking me up and down for some kind of evidence. A lot, I said, glancing over. Raisa noticed the newcomer, 'cause who the hell is that? Kael's younger brother, Rion. The one everyone thought was killed by Sun Mountain Epsilon. I shook my head. He's like us, captured by a ruthless alpha and forced to do whatever it took to survive and protect those he cares about. I felt Raisa's questioning gaze burn a hole in me that I couldn't explain further because Kael held out his hand from across the rows of seating. My heart skipped a few more beats. "Let's go," I urged her. "I do not hurry to catch up to strangers. Thank you," she said, not unkindly, and then lowered her voice. "But it seems I missed something change between you two. Even from across a theater. Gemma, I know what longing looks like." I stiffened, face heating, but she continued, "And my sense of smell is very good. I know what alcohol and longing lead to. Is he a good kisser?" I whirled on her, mortified. Raisa. She lifted an innocent shoulder, shameless. "What do you know who you're talking to?" Kael called my name, and all I wanted was to sprint back to him, but I knew I had to just be freaking calm and walk over. Raisa took my wrist before I could. "It's dangerous to get involved with a cocky alpha, Gemma," she warned, my excitement turning into a chill that slithered down my spine. "Especially one who Connor is hunting and whose brother just returned in seemingly good health from Ceres. I still want to protect you. Just keep this advice in mind." Gemma. Kael called again. "Is everything all right?" "Hi, Ray." She ignored him and patted my ass to get me to jerk into a walk on the other hand, completely subjectively, and it pains me to say this, he is quite attractive, and I think you should climb him like a tree. I was so scandalized that I wished I could disappear. By the time I reached Kael, I had plastered a smile on my face and hoped my face wasn't as red as an apple. He gave me a concerned look when I slipped my hand into his. "Everything all right? You're as red as a ripe date." "It's just the heat," I said through gritted teeth. He went along with it and noted lightly, Well, I do enjoy a nice-looking date. Behind me, Raisa snickered. At the family meal, I knew everyone was pretending like they weren't apprehensive about Rion's return. Apparently, Jara, Jashi, and Kael had tried to keep under wraps what had really happened. But it was hard to keep secrets from such a small group of shifters who had nothing better to do than worry about their packmate, who I learned was known for often sneaking off for days on end. I learned that before this incident, it was usually Nebra that he was disappearing to. Diana and the twins stuck to him like honey, even though nothing was sweet about it. Rion had to know he was going to have his every movement watched. If he did know, he was hiding it well under his carefree personality. Wordless communication passed between me and Kael when we reached the table. While he sat at the head, Raisa and I sat in the middle, just a few chairs away from Rion on the opposite side. He noticed me do so and said, "Hey, Gemma Brooks, I'm sorry about earlier." I offered a brief smile. "It's all right. Maybe we can talk after dinner." I opened my mouth to naively agree, but Raisa said sweetly, "We would love to." Rion observed her, and I did not like the spark of interest in his gaze, there and gone in an instant, and I already knew would Raisa notice it too. What a way to introduce yourself. Raisa Marigold, former consort of Connor Herrick. Rion's smile dropped as quick as a blink. His eyes flicked to me when he connected the dots. "You said you were stolen by him, and we know how difficult it is to escape a vengeful alpha," Raisa added, drawing his attention back to her. "So I would love to exchange escaped stories." The smile came back smooth and charming. "I can't wait to hear yours." "Enough," Kael boomed, making the entire table, who had just listened to the entire tense conversation, jump and turn their attention quickly to their alpha. "These shared meals are supposed to show our unitedness. We don't exchange threats hidden behind fake kindness." Raisa dipped her head and apologized, but Rion clenched his jaw and stared at his plate. "Do you want to welcome back, brother?" Kael asked tersely. "I'm fine without, thank you, brother. I would just like to be in the company of my packmates and enjoy a fresh meal." "Very well, there are a few seats left, but we can dig in." The takers of those seats strode in. Kael's expression darkened and his lip curled over sharpened canines. Dread sluiced through me when he growled. The table turned their heads to the other end of the table. An older male, with a few others behind him, stopped in their track. Though his look was neutral, every muscle in his body tensed alpha. "I'm glad to see you return safely." "Do you know who else returned?" growled. He jerked his chin. The male Rana followed the gesture. His eyes widened and he blanched. Rion gave him a cocky grin. "Nice to see you again, coward. The rest of you too. I'm glad you're still showing your faces, like you didn't leave your only heir to die." The table broke out into murmurs. "All of you, stop," Jachi barked, bolting to his feet. "This is not the time for this." She pointed at Rai. "You five get dinner in your rooms." They seemed too keen to obey, but that only condemned them. "That's right," Rion called after them. "Keep fleeing." Jack whirled on him. "Shut your mouth." Rion clamped his lips closed and waved a hand of dismissal. With a huff, Jackie sat back down. No one moved or spoke. She shot a glare at Kael, who noticed the look only after Ray T had left. Kael cleared his throat, his dawning smile banishing all tension. "Nothing to worry about, packmate. Nothing I can't handle. Anyway, let's just enjoy. And then afterward, we'll watch Helene's play that she's been working on." He gestured to an adolescent female who beamed, a few others bouncing in their seats, presumably actors in said play. Though everyone seemed hesitant to just let that go, they returned to their food and quiet conversations amongst themselves. I bent my head but flicked my gaze up to Kael, finding him already watching me. I gave him a subtle, "I'm sorry" look, and he shook his head imperceptibly in an "it's all right." I felt the need to act normal, so I turned to Raisa and asked, "How are you feeling?" Invigorated, she said quietly with a smile that made me think she was up to something. I already knew she was looking through her lashes at Rion, who was now busy resting his forehead on Diana's, murmuring. I didn't fail to notice she didn't look any better than when we left her apartment. But there are things that you love so much that you would die for them, right? She had said in that alley. This isn't the Rion she wanted back. Please don't do anything rash, I warned her. I also wanted to ask you about, what's next for us, or at least you or me. I don't act rashly sweet, Raisa said, matter-of-fact tower, slyly, smoothly. I planned for the right moment. Then her voice shifted into easy conversation, which unnerved me and made me feel better that she was on her way to recovery. What's next for me, at least, is what I have already discussed with Jara and Jigich. I have nothing left, Gemma, but my loss and my pup growing inside me. I have no home, no family, and no other purpose but to live, not just survive, but live a life where I don't have to be afraid of volatile males. So, you can do whatever you like, go wherever you'd like, and I would certainly enjoy your company, but I have chosen to stay and join Moonwake. This part has ended. Thank you for listening. If you would like to continue listening to the next part, please let me know by leaving a comment.